In this section, we will be working on the back wheel bases. There are two of them, and there are a series of pieces that we need to cut for them. We'll start with the top and bottom, the sides, the front and back. We'll skip the outside for right now, and we'll cut the dowel holders. So top, bottom, sides, front, back, and the dowel holders. I've got my pieces set out here in front of me. Now, of those pieces, we will keep at a single layer two of the top bottom pieces and just mark them top. So the tops are going to be single layers. Everything else that we've got here gets doubled up. Bottoms, front and backs, dowel holders, and the sides. So all of these are double thickness of medium weight chipboard, and as you can see, I've already gone ahead and done that. So the next thing we want to do is to punch some holes for our dowels, and I have marked mine already here. We're going to come in, we'll come up from the bottom a 1/2 inch. Our center line will be a 1/2 inch up from the bottom, and this is on a side piece. And then 2 inches from the back, you can see I put a B on here. And then 1 3/4 inches from the front. 2 inches from the back, 1 3/4 from the front, and a 1/2 inch to the from the bottom of the piece. And this is all center line marks. So then I'll get my heavy duty 1/4 inch punch, and once I get it set so that it looks to be like it's right on the 1/2 inch mark, it's more critical that these are staying exactly the same than well, it's important that they stay exactly the same. So I'm just putting a piece of tape on my punch so that the little guide won't slip. And now that I've got that guide stationary, all I have to do is worry about centering it on the vertical lines. And I'll go ahead and get these punched on all 4 of my sides, just like that. And then on the little 1 inch dowel holder pieces, we'll use this same setting of a 1/2 inch, and I've drawn a line 1/2 inch in so that I can get that centered in there. And just in case it's not perfectly centered, I went ahead and put a T to signify top from the opposite end that I'm punching on, just so that I know that they will align, because what we're going to do is take these guys and put them on top of here just to give a little more support for the dowels that come through here. So punch all 4 sides, punch all 4 of the dowel holders, and then I'll be back. So now we want to make sure we mark these since they're not symmetrical, so we keep all of our parts straight. So I have 2 on either side. Remember, the 2 inches is towards the back, and here's the back of my Locomotive. And what I've done is I've put them together in 2s, made sure that the holes line up properly, and then I've marked the side that is going next to the box with the words box side. And then on the outside, I've got, it says outside on both of them, and I'm just going to put another B back here so that I know on all of these that that's the back. And I think also I'll put right on this one, and on the inside here I'll mark right as well. So now I have these pieces marked. And we need to do some cutting. So I'm going to put those up here for a second. And on our top pieces, these are the ones that are just a single layer of chipboard. We want to, they're an inch wide. We want to take out a notch that is 1/2 inch wide by 3.5 inches long. So 1/2 inch wide, 1/2 inch wide, by 3.5 inches long. So I'm going to do that for both of my top pieces, and then I'll be back. So you can see here I have my two tops with the 3.5 by 1/2 notch cut out. Now on two of the little end pieces, we're going to cut a diagonal, and that diagonal will measure down from the top 1/4 inch. These are 3/4 inch wide, so we want to make a center line. That's at 3/8, and we'll just connect those dots and cut that corner off. So it's 1/4 inch down on the side, 3/8 in the middle, and these pieces you can just cut the same one corner off because you can flip it over because it's symmetrical. So I'll cut those two corners off and then I'll be back. So now I have these two pieces cut, and I'll set them aside. On the end pieces that we did not cut a corner off, you'll want to put a magnet, and I've centered it both ways, and then I'll just put a magnet on there. It's easier to do that before you put it together. And we need to make two more cuts, but we're going to make them on the base sides here. So, and now we're moving into territory where it's not symmetrical, so we need to pay attention to what we're doing. So let's talk a little bit about how this is fitting on here. These are actually two boxes that are going on either side of this interior box here. And the reason we're making these notches is that if I bring one of the tops in here to get the right one, you can see we have to work around the part of the boiler that's coming down here. So that's why we're cutting off this kind of diagonal corner to this. It just was easier to make the boiler all cylindrical and just cut out this notch, I felt. So that's what we're doing. So here, this is that top piece that's coming in. And then if this is our box that's coming in on this side, and it's marked here with the box, and that's with the back, we'll just pick up this one piece. It's the piece that's coming in right here. So we need to cut off a corresponding corner from here. So I'm just going to mark an X up here so I know that this is where I want to cut my piece off. And we'll talk about the size of that in a second. And then on this side, I'll again pick up my box side. Here's my B for the back. I can put this up next to it, and so then I can just mark my X here so I know that this is what's going to come out of that side. Before we cut the wedges from the side pieces, we want to do a measurement to check to see how deep we should cut those wedges. So I have my locomotive here sitting up on the back of the cab. I'm taking a ruler and I'm coming right up to the bottom of the boiler here. Not super tight against it, just kind of next to it. We need to allow space for this little curve here is what we're doing. So I'm going to put that up next to that and then measure the distance down to the top of this double layer of chipboard here. Not to the actual bottom of this piece, but to the top of this double layer of chipboard. In my case, that is 1 1/16 less than 3/4, so that would be 1 11/16. And then I would check this side as well, see if it's different. Mine's still the same. Okay, so I had 1 11/16. Our pieces are 2 inches wide, so I want to cut out the difference. So 16 minus 11 is 5/16. So my wedges that I'm going to cut are 5/16 of an inch deep. Now yours may be a little bit less or more. It's okay if they come down, you cut them a little bit, the wedges a little bit longer, but if you cut them too short, then you'll probably have to do some trimming later so that it fits around the locomotive. So what we want to do for each one of these is we're again going to cut a notch that's 3.5 inches long, but this time it's only 5/16 inch deep. So I'm going to mark 5/16 line here. And I said it was 3.5 inches long. And you can see that's right where I have that X. So when this is, here's the box side coming up here, and then here's that notch coming out. And again on this side over here, I'll measure 5/16 inch. And 3.5 inches in from the front side. And that again, here's my box side coming up against my engine, and this wedge is coming out. So I'll cut those two pieces and then I'll be back. Okay, so I've got my notches cut, you can see, and here's my right one, here's my left one, and I have my pieces lined up like this. So these here, I've got my writing that says outside and box side on each one, and then I took a minute and flipped them this way and wrote inside on that side because I'm going to need to glue up here in a second, and we'll want to make sure we put them in the correct order. Now on the insides with the notches on them, we're going to take and place these little dowel supports or dowel holders. And so just use some wet glue, use a piece of dowel to help you get them aligned. They should line right up because you used your guide on your punch, so they all should be the same distance from the bottom, but sometimes little varieties happen. We get little opportunities. So I'm just going to take and get my dowel in there to keep it aligned, and make sure this is flat along the bottom. So I'm going to repeat that on this on the inside, and then on the other notch side again on the inside. So I'll get those glued on and then I'll be back. Okay, so my little dowel holders are attached. I did take a minute with a small rounded file just to make sure if there was any glue overage or that the holes weren't perfectly round for whatever reason, that my dowels could easily fit in. You want them snug but not hard to get in. And yeah, so now we're ready to do our glue up, and let's just put the left one aside here for a moment. So we need a bottom, we're going to need a top, and the top that we need is the one where the cutout matches so that it's going to come on like this. We have this side. I'm going to just put everything in a row like this. We need one of the cut-off cornered ones for the front and one of the square ones for the back. So this is what we have, or deli paper, whatever you want to call it. So this is similar to the other construction that we've done, where we've got our bottom and the sides are going to go on top of that bottom piece. So I'm going to put this side in first. Remember, it says inside, so I won't get confused there. And I'll put a bead of glue along there, here, and here. Then I can put my side on. Make sure I've got it where I want it. And then the side with this little notch cut out, that notch goes against the notch. It should meet up pretty close to where the top of this side piece has been cut out. And then the plain end that didn't have anything cut out can go back here. I like to keep flipping it around gently, of course, just that helps everything stay square. And just slide it a little bit on your deli paper or your scrap paper. Then we can come in and put the outside on. Make sure we get our back to the back. Where it says inside, it goes to the inside. Turn it upside down and put some pressure on it. Just checking to see if everything's pretty square there. And our dowels should be able to slide in here, hopefully easily, and line right up. These are obviously too long. So even though our wheels aren't going to turn, at least the way I'm doing it, but I put the dowels in here to help transfer the weight of the project towards the interior of the box, so that the whole project will just be resting on the 6 wheels. And in order to make sure it's got enough support, that's why I put these dowels that transfer the weight, get it supported by both this box and not just a wheel that's glued to the outside here. So that's the purpose of having the dowels in there, is to help transfer that weight. And then we can finally take our last piece here, and it will fit right along the top there. And then this notch will allow it to fit against the boiler. And then we'll just let that set up and dry and repeat that construction process, making the mirror image of this to go on the other side. Now the glue has dried up on my two wheelbase sides, and I'm just going to do a little dry fitting here, and they should fit even with the front here, even with the back of the box here, and should fit up underneath the sides okay. Don't worry about a little gap up in here. Now, if it does not fit up against the, if it hangs over a little bit here on the bottom, like that, then what's happening is that this wedge wasn't cut deep enough. So just take your ruler and just carefully, since this is double chipboard, it's pretty sturdy, but you can just take off a sliver. You can determine how much you need to take off, you know, 1/16 of an inch or something, and just cut that off, and then it should fit right in there. And then check for fit on the other side as well. So once you've checked for those fit, we'll go on and put the outside measure to cut that and go on from there. For our outside pieces, the cutting guide says to cut two pieces that are 2 1/4 by 7 1/2, but check the length before cutting. So what we want to do is double check our length here. We haven't changed anything or added anything to the side pieces. Excuse me. So that should still be 7 3/8, which it is. And we want these outside pieces to be 1/8 of an inch longer. So if we add 1/8 of an inch, then that will be 7 1/2. So that should be right on. So we'll cut our piece 2 1/4 by 7 1/2. And I've already done that here. And that 2 1/4 is a little bit too tall, but sometimes it's hard to measure a 1/16 of an inch real exact, and you want this piece to fit along here exactly. So at 2 1/4, it's just a little bit too long. So if you just line it up with the bottom and then come along here on the top with your pencil, that'll probably be about a 1/16 of an inch. But then you can cut that off with your craft knife and you'll get an exact fit to this piece without having to measure that. So I'm going to do that and then I'll be back. So here's my piece that I've cut to the correct height, and I've just put it up right against here, and I can see that it fits flush, and then it overhangs 1/8 of an inch here in the back. And in fact, what I want to do is, you can see I put an R on here for the right side. I'm going to mark the back and the front as well so that I don't get confused about what I'm doing. So these pieces, like I said, are going right on the outside, so we need to mark and punch holes here. And if we measure from the front, we know this is 1 3/4 inches to the center there. So, sorry, I have to flip this around to measure that. So that's 1 3/4 inches. That's my pen. So that's 1 3/4 inches. And then the distance in between these two holes is 1, 2, 3 5/8. So I'll just make a tick mark at 3 5/8, and then we can draw a line there. Now, to see how far up we want to cut these holes, we need to account for this double thickness of chipboard. So if it was 1/2 inch to the center line before without the double width of chipboard here. It should be 5/8. So what I'm going to do is just take a little scrap piece of chipboard and measure up 5/8, and then just try with my punch to punch a circle that is centered on that 5/8, and you can hear the clicks that I just moved my guide up to there. And now I'll punch that, and I'll see, does that meet up? So I'm just lining that up to see, does that meet up with my circle? And if you have a spare piece of dowel, you can, try that in there. I can see that it lines up there. So this is a good distance on my punch, and again I'll put my piece of blue tape on here so that that doesn't want to change while I punch my holes here. So I can use that as get that centered on the two lines that I drew there. And then if I line this flush up with the bottom and flush up with the front, those holes should align. Now if you need to do some adjusting so that your dowels will go all the way in there and line up properly, so you can just take your little round file and do that. Mine are going in without any shifting here, so I know those are good. So then I will do that for the left side as well, making sure that I use the left side so that I make sure that I end up with two mirror images. Also, this is the outside, and I'm going to mark that as the outside so that I make sure I'm going to put pattern paper on here, and I only want to put it on the outside. So now we're ready to talk about pattern paper. For the pattern paper, we want to have a tab that is a 1/2 inch longer on the front and the back, and about a 1/2 inch or so on the bottom. The top is going to be flush. So if you're not using paper where, like I am, that I have to want to be careful about the pattern, you can simply cut a piece that's 8.5 inches wide by 2 3/4 inches long, and that will be fine. Now for me, I'm centering this on these stamps here, and I want the back to have a full stamp. So when I go to cut this out, I'll line up this back and I'll cut my 1/2 inch tab there, here, and then I'll just make sure I have at least a 1/2 inch down here on the bottom. So I'm going to do that for both the pieces I need, and then I'll be back. So here you can see I have my pattern paper cut. I've also, because mine are different, you can see here's the 1/2 of the stamp on this side and a 1/2 of the stamp on that side. I put a post-it note on them to mark left and right so that I don't get confused with what's going on where. So to get started, what we want to do is put score tape on the outside of the chipboard, and I'm going to be pretty generous with my score tape because the wheels are going to get glued to this piece, and I don't want them, I want the paper that's on this piece to be well attached to the chipboard. Otherwise, of course, we'd lose our structural integrity. So I'm going to go ahead and get my score tape on, and then I'll be back. Okay, I've got my score tape on, and I've just kind of put the left side aside so I won't get confused here. I trimmed a little bit around my holes here so that the score tape won't interfere with the dowels. And so then this is just going to get adhered on here with the top edge flush and 1/2 inch tabs on the left and right, and it'll be a little bit more than 1/2 inch on the bottom. So I'll get that attached. So I have my paper adhered, and I've gone ahead and added some score tape to my tabs. Now the only one that I want to wrap at this point is the one that's on the back end. So this is my front end over here, and you can mark this if you need to. I know that because of my patterned paper, with the way it ends, that's my back. Also, if you get confused, you can measure the distance from the end to the hole, and this is the 1 3/4 inch side is the front. So anyway, so for this, we're going to wrap this to the back here. So I want to just cut a little bit of a angle off of this top piece here. And then down here in the front, we can get rid of this excess that's on the back here. So I'll cut at an angle up to the corner. And then I'll just take my craft knife, you can take a ruler if you want, and come down straight. And then I'll probably just come in just at a slight angle as well, so that we have that. So then this end can get wrapped. And then we can just kind of train these to want to turn, and then you can cut just at a slight angle, cut these corners out. So we have that. And then I would come in and ink this top corner for sure where there's the chipboard, and that's really, you could ink on this side as well. If you're not going to use trim, you can ink here, but we can do that later. The only part that's best to do right now is this top little corner there. And then you'll want to come and punch the 2 holes. You'll have to adjust your punch to do that, but get rid of the pattern paper on these 2 holes. So I have my 2 holes punched, and now I'll repeat that process for the left side, making sure I end up, of course, with the mirror image. And since you've marked everything, that shouldn't be an issue. So now I have my pieces wrapped, and we can just take those 2 and set them aside for a moment. And we're ready now to put the wheel bases onto the locomotive. And when we do this, we want to make sure that everything is flush back here at the back. This should all nicely line up. You might want to have a ruler or something flat that can help you make sure that everything is flat. These 2 pieces should be equal in length, so it shouldn't be an issue. But when we glue this on, we'll put glue on the side here, and we can also put it on the top, and then we can set it in place here. But then to get it positioned correctly, you want to make sure you have the Locomotive in the upright position. That'll make sure that everything is staying flush and level, and that everything will be in alignment from left to right. So just want to, obviously these pieces will go on only one way because of the cutout that fits around the boiler here, so you don't have to worry about getting the left one on the right side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that glue up for both sides. I glued both of the sides on at once. I just quickly, moved from one side to the other, and then I have, as you can see, I've got my level up here on the top, which is very handy. I've checked back here in the back and everything is flush, and now having the level on there, I can put some pressure on here and make sure that the bubble's staying level and everything looks good. And now I'll just let that dry. And now that our wheelbases have dried thoroughly, we can add the outsides. We'll just use some wet glue here. Make sure you avoid the dowel holes, and if you fold these tabs over from the front and the bottom, they should help you fit this on. It overhangs in the back here 1/8 of an inch, but should line up here with these other pieces that also overhang 1/8 of an inch. And before you get it, let it set up to dry, just make sure your dowels are that everything is lined up there as well. And once the glue is set up, then you can fasten these two tabs, the one here on the front and the one here on the bottom, and then we'll just let that set up. One little thing before you fasten this tab, it is overhanging a little bit over the edge down here, so you'll just want to cut that back. You can use your scissors or a craft knife so that it lines up neatly with the bottom here, and just give that some ink. And you might want to put just a little dab of glue underneath here. And then the final thing that we'll want to do is put a piece of decorative paper here on the front underneath the boiler. So we need to make a pattern for that. And what I've done is measured across here, and it's about 4 inches, just a hair under. So I'll just cut. This is just scrap paper that I had. It's thin, but it's thin. It's like printer paper. And I'm holding it up here even on the two edges. And then I'm just going to use my fingernail and kind of press around the bottom of that curve. And once I've got that, I've got a 3-inch circle here, and I'm just going to find where that circle hits that mark that I made with my nail, probably the deepest part of it right there, and then make sure I have that centered here, and then just draw a line around. I'm going to cut that out and see how it fits. Hold that up against there and see how that goes. good. I think it's just a little bit deep. So I'm just going to cut a little bit off the two tops here and see how that fits. And now that's pretty well there, fits pretty well. So I'm going to make a crease down here at the bottom so I'll know how tall to make it. And then I'll add a 1/2 inch onto that. So wherever that is, a 1/2 inch. So I'll measure this, and whatever this measures, I'll cut my piece, and then I'll cut that little arc out. Try it again. I may want to cut some slivers off of the edge here because I don't want it to come right up to the edge. I want it to hold back just a little bit. And once I have the pattern paper in here, I'll crease this again, and then we can make a tab here at the bottom. So I'll get that cut and then I'll be back. So here's my pattern paper, and because I'm working with this that has a distinctive pattern, I want to make sure that it kind of matches up here. And so I know that on my edges here, the bottom of the stamp is at the bottom of the wheelbase. So I've taken my pattern piece and I folded up a 1/2 inch on it, and that's where I'm going to place my pattern. I'm also trying to center it here left and right so that I get it kind of symmetrical. So now I have, and don't forget to unfold this, so now I have something that I can use to cut my piece to go around the front. So here is my piece of pattern paper. I've put score tape on it and cut around the little arc here at the top, and then I have a tab here at the bottom which I've angled in slightly on both sides, and so that is going to fit right up inside of there. I should also say that I did ink all of these edges all around here, and so I'll just put that on. And the way I like to put a piece like this on is to remove the tape backing on just that tab first, slide it into place, then I can adhere the tab, and then I can remove the rest of the backing and I'll know it's perfectly going to be in place. So now there is our back wheel base in place. We've left this 1/8 inch around here because we'll have a piece that comes to cover this all up that can be removed so we can have access to the box inside.